This video is going to demonstrate how to begin your wedge sketches. So I have 3 triangles really, and they were traced from my final mandala paper. If you don't have these and don't know how to get these, then you need to watch the previous video. Alright, so I'm going to start with this one. I'm just going to put that one to the side and zoom in on this one. So this is where I'm going to begin my first 2 sketches. I want you to do 3 different designs and we'll pick your best one out of the 3. So typically whenever I teach this in class, we actually have a circle. So the whole thing on the paper is actually looks kind of like a pizza, but we don't necessarily have compasses at home, so we're improvising here. So normally this is where the mandala exists, so your wedge would be here and then this would be negative space. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually kind of cut off some of my negative space. I don't want my whole design to fill the whole paper. I want it to just be a part of the paper. So I'm going to make some sort of outside shape. So this is going to be my wedge. This is going to be negative space. Okay. Now this is a different sketch. This could be something else. I'm not going to start that one yet. I'm ignoring this one for right now. Alright, so that's the first thing. It's like, what do you want, what kind of shape do you want for the outside of your mandala? And put that shape in. Next, I want you to divide your wedge asymmetrically. Okay, so just as a reminder, it's equal but not the same. So that means it can't be a mirror image. A lot of students want to make a mirror image in this, and I want you to remember that when we start tracing, you are going to have a mirror image. This is going to be flipped and traced, and then flipped and then traced. Alright, so we are going to have symmetry, but not in this part. Okay, we're going to have asymmetry in this part. So what I like to do is divide this somehow. It could be like a line going this way, or it could be, you could use your initial. Say your name starts with an A. I'm going to show you how to use an A. Okay, so that is kind of dividing it asymmetrically. So now if I divide this wedge in half, it is not going to be a mirror image. All right, so you can divide it any way you want, but it's a place to get started. Okay, so now I'm going to start adding things to this. Now whenever I say things, it could be actual like objects, like things that we can recognize, or it could be just shapes. Now one thing to think about whenever you're doing this is that whatever is on this side is going to be reflected over here. So you can create something that could be, you know, a mirror image or a reflection. So for example, maybe up here I want to create maybe a dragonfly. So it can be recognizable, but it doesn't have to be. A lot of times whenever I do these, I just like to do shapes. But it's completely up to you. Okay, so this could be my dragonfly, and I could create some lines in there. Now I'm not done yet. Like, this is not even complete. So the thing I need to have is balance between my positive and my negative. Right now I have a lot of negative and not a whole lot of positive. So that means that I need to add more. So I could just start kind of adding some interesting shapes, and then I could add some patterns in there. The one thing that I really want you to be careful of is having things that are too repetitive and monotonous. Now it's okay to have a variety of shapes in, and it's okay to have some things repeating, but you don't want it completely repeating. So I'm just kind of filling some of my negative space in. Alright, so that area looks pretty good. There's some positive, there's some negative, you know, that kind of thing. But now I need to look at what's going to happen in the rest of the rest of this thing. So I don't know, there's a dragonfly, so I could maybe put some lily pads in if I wanted. And one thing I want you to think about is like, what could you put in this that might symbolize something about you? Or is there something that you really like? You know, maybe you play a lot of video games. Maybe there's a particular character that you like. These actually look like Pac-Mans. You know, but they're supposed to be lily pads. Maybe there's, you know, something that you like that you want to include, or something that you know you can symbolize you that you can include. All right, so I kind of have a big dragonfly and I have some lily pads, but I have a lot of negative space. So I need to think about how can I break up some of this negative space. Now I like to have things that are repeating. So notice I have multiple lily pads. I feel like I probably should have maybe another dragonfly in too. But I don't want to have things constantly repeating. So I want to have things repeating, but not overly so. If we just draw circles over and over again, it's just going to be very monotonous, and you're going to get tired of it pretty quick. So I don't really like that, the overlapping lily pad. So I might want to think about, you know, maybe I need to move this lily pad a little bit. This is one of the reasons why we do our designs in pencil, so we can always erase and move things around. Okay, so I have a couple of the dragonflies. I just really need to look at some of my negative space and kind of figure out how to make it interesting. I'm going to just add kind of a line of circles, and that'll kind of create a path. So really, I'm looking at just my negative shapes and trying to fill in those shapes with a little bit of something that might be interesting, so there's not tons of just negative space that's boring. All right, so there I have one design. My next design, I'm going to do something that's just shapes. It's not going to have anything recognizable. So I'm going to do the same thing I did for this one though. I am going to start by setting up the outside part of my mandala. And then I am going to divide it somehow, some way, asymmetrically. Okay, so again, this cannot mirror this because I just put that line. All right, so now I'm going to kind of look at adding maybe some interesting shapes. Now, whenever you're doing this, it's really just shapes and line. I want you to stay away from shading for right now. We are going to add shading, but not yet. All right, so I really like that line. I'm going to make another one. And then maybe another one coming in here. All right, so I feel like 3 is enough. Now, if I start adding more just like that, it's going to become monotonous and it's probably going to lose interest. So I'm going to make sure that I have 3, I have things repeating, but I don't want to just only have those. I want to start adding new things, new ideas, new shapes, new lines. All right, so I added a few of those. I feel like this guy has been left out, so I'm going to add some of those to this guy too. All right, so now I need to think what can happen in my negative space that might be interesting. It might be a little bit different than what I already have, but it'll still work well with my design. I can also think about what should I add in this center here. I don't know, maybe some repeating shapes, but then I could add some shading or some patterns. I always like to make paths of circles. I'm not sure why. It's just something that I enjoy doing, so I'm going to add some of those here. But I don't want to go overboard. Okay. So here I do have some negative space. I have a little bit of negative space, maybe a little bit too much negative space, so maybe I need to add just a little bit more and then I will be done. But I got to figure out what that might be, right? So I'm just going to kind of redefine that negative space and maybe add a little bit of shape. There's not a whole lot of negative space in this area. All right, so here are my two designs. Now the next one, I'm gonna show you the bad one. All right, so I'm gonna write good on these, okay? Because I feel like these are good designs. There's good balance. There's a good balance between positive and negative. There's interesting things going on. Let's talk about the bad. All right, so say you have your triangle here, okay? And you're like, okay, this is my corner, so I'm just going to start. Okay, so error number one, I didn't divide it asymmetrically. I also didn't define where my wedge is. All right, now once you start doing this, then you're like, oh, well, maybe I could add something like this, and then you start trying to create this symmetrical design, and that's not what I want you to do, okay? So this has symmetry, and we don't want symmetry. Another thing that I see people do all the time is they kind of take the optical illusion, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to keep adding the optical illusion. Well, if you think about that, you have to do things 8 times. And so if you're doing these same lines 8 times, first of all, your design is going to be boring. Boring to your viewer and to yourself. Okay, so that is just way too monotonous. That's too much repetitive lines. So here we have symmetry, that's no good, and then we have repetitive lines that are not interesting, no good. Okay, so make sure that you divide and decide where your wedge is going to be, and that you divide it asymmetrically. Okay, all right, you try it.